It is headed by the Union Finance Minister, that is Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman, and also along with the assistance of all the finance ministers of all the states of India. So it's a key decision-making body that takes a lot of important decisions regarding GST, and the recommendations are made to the government, very important, regarding the goods and services that may be subjected to tax, exempted from tax, the rate changes which could be there, the principles governing place of supply, threshold limits, and the floor rates which should be there, and also special rates and provisions for some states being there. And just to add that we ourselves have made, foreign on behalf of clients, the drafting of several representations regarding this exemptions to be given, or even the concessional rate of taxes to be made applicable in respect of wide range of supplies of goods and services. And these have found acceptance, and taking cognizance of the representations which have been drafted by us and presented by our clients. There are numerous instances wherein there has been a change in the rates, a beneficial change in the rates, which has actually helped or enabled a particular sector, including priority sectors like the agriculture. Just to give one example. So there has been in this background on 28th of May, this particular meeting which had taken place, the 43rd meeting, which was chaired by the Honorable Finance Minister. Can we go to the next? And in light of which we are today looking at these various changes which have taken place and what have been the impacts of those changes. Okay. First and foremost, the thing which is uppermost in everybody's mind is about the COVID relief measures, and obviously the government also is very much, given its force and its support for the purpose of this relief measures, which are being implemented across the country, the length and breadth of our country, including providing of the various materials. So, as a COVID-19 relief measure, there have been a number of specified COVID-19 related goods in the leading up to this, GST Council meeting, which, in respect of which, there have been customs exemptions which have been given, such as for medical oxygen, oxygen concentrators, oxygen storage, transportation equipment, and also in respect of remdesivir, the API relating to remdesivir injection, and certain diagnostic markers test kits. So they have been also now recommended for full exemption from IGST, not just when it is imported on a free of cost basis for free distribution as it was there, but even if it's imported on a payment basis, or for donating to the government on recommendation of state authority to any relief agency. And just to reiterate, these goods were already being exempted from the basic customs duty. Can we go to the next one? So these exemptions presently are valid till August of 2021. Coming to the next one. Okay, the PPT is visible now. I couldn't see the PPT in between. Okay. The exemption also has been extended to, amphotericin B, due to this rising black fungus cases, which we understand a lot of diabetic people and all who have suffered from COVID, they are, also facing this, fallout or a side effect. And these are also exempted from the basic customs duty as well. Also, with a group of ministers, a committee has been constituted and formed to go into the need to for further relief to COVID-19 related individual items immediately, because it is not just these items, this oxygen cylinders or ventilators or other oxygen equipments and devices which are the subject matter of an exemption, but there are so many other things which are equally important. We have the masks, we have the kits, we have also the other like thermometer and the oximeter. And so the government, the group of ministers is going to give its report by the 8th of June 2021. So they are on to it, and there are the members of this particular group are covering ministers as disparate as from the Maharashtra and also from Meghalaya and others. So also some exemption, concessional rate has been given for this to support lymphatic filariasis, which is an endemic elimination program. Filariasis, incidentally, is something which is a kind of a chronic thing once it gets into a person's system, this filariasis. So this again has been always one of the priority items to eliminate this from India as well, pursuant and aligned with the international programs which have been taken up in this regard by various international organizations. So in India also, consequent to these developments, the GST rate on DC tablets, there is a technical name for it, which is covered in the PPT. It has been recommended for reduction of it to 5% from 12%. Next, Rashmi. Rashmi, it is not moving.
Yeah, ma'am, I have changed. Is it not visible?
Okay, now it isn't. It's not visible.
Okay, ma'am, I'll share. Ma'am, now is it visible?
It's not visible, Rashmi. Okay, now it is.
Yeah.
Now it can be seen. Yeah, good. Coming to the certain specific clarifications which have been there. So in respect of the education sector, this was again something which has been a long-standing requirement to bring forth further clarity in such a priority area, like the serving of the food, including the midday meals, under the midday meal scheme sponsored by the government, which is being exempted when it's given to educational institution, including these preschool and Anganwadis. And now it is irrespective of funding of such supplies from the government grants or corporate donations, as the case may be, it has been rightly considered and it has been clarified that it is covered in the same exemption from GST in notification 12/2017. So this was something again which was a long-standing need and a very priority item at that, which has been addressed. Services provided by way of examination, including the entrance exam, if fees charged by the National Board of Exam or similar central or state educational boards and input service relating thereto. So these are nothing but the clarifications given in respect of the entry number 66, which had specified the exemption, a wide-ranging exemption, obviously in respect of the services provided by the educational institutions, which are providing the preschool, school education, as well as the services, specific services provided or supplied to such educational institutions also, as well as to the other educational institutions which may be giving say 10+2, as well as the qualifications which are recognized by law, these kinds of courses also. So this is something which is a clarification to this particular entry. So possibly it can be claimed as a retrospective applicability, considering it's beneficial in nature, and it may be said to be something which is clarifying something which was more or less already understood to be covered therein or exempted therein. Coming to the real estate sector, once again, this just to highlight this particular aspect, coming to the landowners under the joint development agreement or the JDA, wherein there would be a area sharing arrangement which would be in place between the developer as well as the landlords. So therein there would be a construction service which would be provided by the developer to the landlords, against the non-monetary consideration of the rights to develop, which is taxable under the GST levy. So in that background, there was always a question as to, first of all, whether there was a liability at all in respect of the construction which was being done and handed over as an immovable property to the landowners, or If there was no liability, why there was no liability, and if there was a liability, when was it required to be discharged? Who was liable to discharge the liability? And most important, even if the tax were to be charged and collected from the landowner by the developer, whether a credit was available to the landowner. So these were the kind of questions or issues, long-running issues, may I add, over the years, which have been there and plaguing the real estate sector and even in GST. These kinds of issues have continued and been debated. And coming to the first one is the point that, can we go back to the earlier slide? Yeah. Yeah. So coming to the first point is the point that if we are looking at a developer, the developer has entered into the agreement or an understanding with the landlord. The landlord, because he does not have the required technical resources, or he does not have the monetary resources in order to do the development of the land which is there belonging to him. And also on the other side, we have the promoter or a developer who is a person who is having the requisite, the money, the monetary resources, the technical resources, and the facilities and the contractors who can actually do the development of the project, be it a residential, be it a commercial project, or a plotted development project, as the case may be. So these two parties would be coming together and entering into an understanding under which the rights of developing a particular property which is belonging to the landowner would be provided to the developer, and the developer in turn would be doing all the works of construction, getting all the required approvals, the plan sanctions, and the construction would be undertaken by the developer in respect of such land which is belonging to the landowners. And in the course of which, in the end of which, though there is a lot of man, material, labor which is involved, but an immobile property was being handed over to the landowner by the developer, which led to a school of thought that it's possible that in respect of this particular activity, there should not at all be a tax levy, because the intention is to deliver or do the handover of an immobile property. Okay, and as we know, the sale of land or sale of building is not taxable. It's covered as a Schedule 3 item in the GST law. So that being the case, go a little further in the GST, since we are talking here about the the changes which have been brought forth in the GST regime. Therein, the scope of supply would include even the supply of the goods or services, which is done not just for a monetary consideration, but even other than a monetary consideration. And in between, there was a Supreme Court judgment in the erstwhile regime of service tax, wherein in a case called Balabhaskara, though it was not a very well-reasoned decision, however, being the Supreme Court of India, they held that there is a liability in respect of the construction which was done for the landlords by the developer. So that was one point in respect of which there was a certain revenues hands got strengthened. And further taking a cue in the GST law, certainly there was a possible view which was emergent to say that there is, though the handover takes place or the delivery takes place of an immobile property, but whatever is the construction which is being done under the agreement which has been entered by the landlord with the developer, that could be said to be done against the non-monetary consideration of the rights which are being given by the landlord, and consequently there is a construction service which may even be as something which is taxable as far as GST is concerned. A similar thought process was also emergent in the 2013 ruling as far as L&T Supreme Court was concerned, where again they had taken a similar thought process that once the agreement had been entered by the developer with the the buyer, and the construction done thereunder was said to be taxable, though they did not explicitly comment on the JDA and the landlord share. So now, coming to the aspect that assuming that there is a liability of GST in respect of the landlord share on which the developer is going to discharge the tax, the question came when to pay the tax. Because remember that the GST levy is attracted not just when the services are supplied, but also when the services are agreed to be supplied. So the moot point was, when are the services agreed to be supplied, provided by the developer to the landlord? That could be said that right at the point at which the JDA has been entered, that they have agreed to supply the services from the developer side to the landlord side. And consequently, should the levy attract at that point itself? But usually, if you see at that stage, the developer also could be cash strapped because he has to do so much of heavy investment into the development stages of the project. Initial stage, he may not have that much of the monies either in his hand, nor that kind of a working capital. So taking cognizance of all this, initially there was a 4/2018. Subsequently, there was one more notification which came 6/2019 for the projects which were undertaken post April 19, wherein they said that the tax liability in respect of this landlord share of constructed area could be paid at the time of the completion certificate. Okay, or it could be done at the time of the occupancy. So it was being postponed to that extent. And this was actually a facility which had been provided to the developers because the lawmakers in their wisdom also realized that there may be a problem for them to have that much of funds to pay the taxes in the initial stages if they were to do so. So therein, what happened was there was a mismatch or a timing mismatch, if one had to say. Because remember, even the landowners in several of the projects may be liable to tax. Why? Because they may be having the value of the construction services in their hands also to be taxed when therein they are entering agreements with their end customers for their share of flats in the course of the construction work which is taking place. So to that extent, if they are going to be selling flats, certainly the same logic applies. What applies to the developer applies to the landowner, and to the extent they are receiving monies or these payments from the end customers, that could be again treated to be a construction service which is provided by them to the end customers, and to that extent there is a taxable supply by them. Which comes to the next step, that what about the credit eligibility? Can the credit actually be availed in respect of the taxes if the developer charges them to the landlord? And the answer is yes, to the extent of the flats which are sold prior to the completion on which the landlord discharges the liability, certainly he would be eligible to take the credit. But then here there is a slight twist in all of this. The twist being that in case there is any kind of a customer who has come to the landlord somewhere in the beginning, let's say somewhere in May of now, let's say 2021, but actually the project may be getting done only by December 2022. Till when the developer is given a facility to postpone the payment of the taxes as per this particular notification 6/19. So then what happens is that the landlord has sold the flat number, say 104, to the customer, which is of his share of flats, out of his share of flats, and he is liable to pay the tax maybe in the, let's say in the month of May of 21. But then if the postponement is done at the developer's end to raise the invoice for the construction services for that flat up to December of next year, then how can he take a credit when he is liable to pay the tax today? The landlord is liable today. How can he take a credit set off of something, a tax liability which is discharged by the developer at a future date, let's say next year? So to address this issue, they have now come out with this clarification, which all along we obviously have been actively suggesting to our clients that though the government has given a facility, you can certainly look at preponing or raising a little bit in it earlier itself. These invoices we have suggested to the developers also to say that you raise it a little earlier. To that extent, you will be in a position to give the invoice. The credit set off will be available. So to continue with my example, in the month of May itself, if the invoice is raised for flat number 104, let's say, to that extent, the set off will be taken because the landlord also has, entered into agreement and received the monies from his customer in that month. So there is a matching of the inflow and the outflow, the input tax credit and the output tax liability. He can get the benefit of the credit in this period. Because if he gets it in the end, it becomes a cost for him. He cannot take a set off by then. Why? Because by then the landlord would have sold the flats on which he would have paid the tax on the advances, and he does not get to utilize the credit simply because the invoices have not been raised to him at all. So now the developer, by virtue of this clarification has been said, you can pay the tax anytime before or at the time of the CC or the OC. So this is something which is going to be very beneficial. And just to add on one more impactful point which is there, when the landlord is selling the residential flats on which they are paying the output GST at 5%, and still they would be eligible to take a set off of the developers' invoices to the extent of the output tax which is payable by them. The credit facility is going to be eligible to such a landlord. However, the credit will not be eligible to the extent of the units sold post OC. Can we go to the next? Yeah. Some more clarifications have come about. One is about the parts of sprinklers, drip irrigation systems, which are falling under tariff heading 8424. So, sold separately, GST is applicable at the rate of 12% only. Why this has come about? Because earlier there has been a circular 81/55 of 2018, wherein it was clarified that sprinkler system consisting of nozzles, laterals, and other components would attract 12% GST rate. But then it was not known whether if you just sell these parts or these components separately, still whether 12% is going to be applicable. So this has actually cleared the ambiguity, and again, a very, I would say, timely requirement, because again, if you look at it, the agricultural sector is one of the priority sectors which have been focused upon by the present dispensation of the government. Next. Yeah. So coming to certain other rationalizations or reduction as far as the tax rates are concerned. So one more is the IGST rate reduction from 18 to 5% on the repair value of the ships or vessels re-imported after repairs. And also similarly, the rate of tax on the maintenance, repair, overhaul services, what they call as MRO, for ships and other vessels, engines, components, parts, and services relating to these kinds of ships and vessels, they have reduced it to 5%. When you compare it with the overseas counterpart, wherein there would have been an arbitrage effect of 5% of BCD. And similarly, they had done a fitment for the aircrafts in April 2020. So that benefit of the concessional rate in notification 11/2017 has now been given not just for the aircrafts, but now it is made available even to the vessels and ships, maintenance, repair, overhaul services. And also the place of supply for these services in the B2B segment is proposed to be changed to location of recipient, and notification to that effect also has been given. It would do good for us to recall, at this particular juncture, that also to give this kind of a benefit, sometime back, maybe around 1.5 to 2 years back, they had come out with a similar notification in respect of the research and development services which are there, in respect of drug development, in respect of clinical trials, in respect of various nature of molecules and their analysis and testing and giving of the reports, and various such pharma related product development life cycles. There was a specific in this particular master notification, they had notified to say that the place of supply would be the location of the recipient, and consequently, if all the other export of service conditions were satisfied, then obviously it would be treated as a export of services, including payment to be done in foreign exchange. This again was something which was a very beneficial thing, because there had been a lot of unnecessary disputes which were going on in that regard, and this clarity came somewhere in mid of 2019. Can we go to the next? Yeah. Similarly, coming to the agricultural and the food processing sectors, so the services by way of milling of wheat or paddy into flour, which is fortified with minerals by the millers or otherwise, or for rice, to the government or the local authority for distribution of the flour or rice under the PDS, say it is exempt from GST if the value of the goods in the composite supply does not exceed 25%. Okay. So this exemption is already well enshrined in the entry number 3A, if we see, because therein there is a specific entry which talks about, the transactions in the contract of which involves both supply of goods and services, wherein the value of goods should not exceed 25%, and wherein such supplies are made to the governments or to the local authorities, government including central state governments as well as to the local authorities. So herein they are basically bringing out that clarity and telling that if this is being done to government or local authorities, then certainly there is going to be the coverage in the exemption, and otherwise it would attract the GST at the rate of 5% if supplied to any person registered in GST, including person registered for payment of TDS, such as in the case of this government. So for this transaction, the exemption can be availed either from entry number 3A, or later on, if it is exceeding 25% the value of goods, then we have to go to the shelter of this 5% tax rate, which is more or less what it is as far as job work is concerned, because job work is doing the processing on the goods which are belonging and given for the purpose of processing by a registered person. So therein for food related processing for the chapter headings 1 to 22, they have actually given the facility of a concessional rate of tax of 5% in the notification 11/2017. So there is a similar thing which is being done to bring about a parity herein in respect of these kinds of services of milling as well, wherein it's applied to any person registered in GST, including a person registered for payment of TDS. Can we go to the next? So as I was telling here, there is a slightly tricky issue which has also been examined in numerous advanced rulings. That is, what is this 25% of total value being the goods portion? Is it to be determined based on the contract which has been entered? Is it to be determined based on the materials which have actually been used? What happens if somebody is to undervalue the value of the goods portion, if any? So like this, there are a few open areas which may be there, which I would say needs to be taken cognizance on the case to case based on the facts to see what is said to constitute this 25% of the goods portion, which could be there in these kinds of transactions. And as long as it is not getting exceeded beyond 25%, then certainly this exemption should be available. Okay, when this kinds of milling is done to the government or the local authorities. So coming to the next one, can we go to the next slide? I've already covered this. Yeah. Also, there has been a clarification. Again, this is further to bring forth a certain clarity in respect of the GST rates for certain services. So GST is payable on the annuity payments which are received as a deferred payment, as on a like a installment basis for the construction of road, and the exemption is there for the annuities presently in entry number 23A for the service by way of access to a road or a bridge. Okay, so there was always a doubt or a gray area which had been there. There was also an advanced ruling wherein this issue had been examined, that whether the scope of the exemption should be provided only for the payments which are done for the service by way of access to road or bridge, or whether even it should cover for the construction of road payments as well. Okay. So obviously the advanced rulings are something which we need to take with a pinch of salt, considering that they are usually not well reasoned, and most of them have a revenue bias, which was there in that particular ruling as well, wherein they had held that only to the extent of the service of access to road there is an exemption. But obviously it indicates to us what is the thought process which is being adopted by the department and its officers. So herein, coming to this annuity payments which are received as a deferred payment for the construction of road, that has been now clarified to be said to be something which is taxable under GST, because there was a lot of questions being raised. There was a lot of confusions which were prevailing. There were different treatments which were being given by different SSCs. So what is it that is the major difference which is there between a toll and an annuity? That also becomes something which we may need to understand here. So toll is a payment made by users of road to the concessionaires for the use of road, whereas an annuity is an amount which is paid by the National Highway Authority of India to concessionaires for the construction of road. So an annuity is a consideration for the service provided by the concessionaire to the National Highway Authority of India. So who is the concessionaire? The concessionaire is the person who has been given the concession, or he's been entered into with the agreement for the purpose of doing the investment and doing the development as far as the infrastructure is concerned for the roads. And therein, when they are doing this kind of an investment and doing the development of the infrastructure of the road and its works, then there is a certain payment which is being done to them, and that would be the payment which is made for the services given to the NHAI. So if we go back to the 22nd GST Council meeting, there was some talk which was going on, wherein they had actually indicated, it was not put across in so many words, but an indication or a recommendation was being discussed to give an exemption from GST on the annuity which is received by the construction companies for the construction of roads. So this was something which was being talked about at that time. This was in 2017, just a few months after the GST law came. But the exemption on the annuity payment for these services provided by way of access to a road or bridge, given by entry 23A, this was not exempting the annuity payment for construction services, which was expected. At that point of time, there was this kind of an expectation. There was also an internal circular given by NHAI, wherein they said that GST should not be paid against annuity payments. But now if we see, after all this time, close to 3 years of time, 2 or 3 years of time, they have now come out with the clarification that GST applies to the construction of roads. And also they have further clarified something which we always knew, that the annuity paid for service of access to road or bridge is exempt. So to the other side, of course, if they are telling it is taxable, the credit which is pertaining to that is very much going to be eligible as well. And that credit set off and net off is also going to be available to these kinds of taxable service providers. Also, services supplied to a government entity by way of construction of a roadway, it attracts GST at the rate of 18%. A government entity has been defined, its authority or any other body, including could be a society or trust or corporation, which could be set up by an act of parliament or state legislature, or it could be established by any government. Once again, it could be under any act, such as the Societies Registration Act, with 90% or more participation by way of equity or control to carry out a function entrusted by the central government, state government, union territory, local authorities. So these kinds of services, they say it is attracting GST at the rate of 18%. And example could be, these kinds of entities, we have these cells which are there at the state level, which are constituted as societies, but which are set up for the purpose of promoting, developing, and also enhancing the e-facilities, the entire structure of the infrastructure, which could be there as far as the IT is there for a particular state. It is there in Karnataka as well. So from that perspective, that could be one example of a government entity. Shall we go to the next one? Yeah, we'll go to the next one. I went through this. Yeah, next. Yeah, financial sector, coming to this, the services supplied by the government to the undertakings of PSUs by way of guaranteeing the loans taken by such entity from banks and financial institutions, been exempted from GST. This had already been exempted. There was an explicit entry in 12/2017. And this was clarified once again, with respect to the nature of the transaction. And some of these things, so there is no notification, just the clarification has come about so far. Of course, can we go to the next? I think I've been muted. Okay. Yeah, coming to this, again, the relaxation extension under section 168A, that is time limit for completion of various actions by any authority or any person under the GST Act, which was falling during the period 15th April 2021, which is when the spike in COVID cases has started and lots of states went into a partial or full lockdown. Up to 30th May 2021, they had given this relaxation, for This various actions would also mean not just actions in terms of passing of orders, etc., by various departmental authorities, but also in respect of the replies to be submitted, documents to be submitted, information to be submitted by the SSC against any letter sent by the department, inquiry given by the department, could be some communication for GST audit given by the department. So in all these cases, they have once again they are given an extension up to 31st of May 2021, which obviously is now past. So once again, they have given a further extension because of this ongoing pandemic, which has been there. The time limit for completion of these actions falling from 15th April to 29th June, again they've extended it to 30th of June 2021. If you recall, even in the last year, when the lockdowns had initially begun, there was a similar such couple series of notifications, starting from notification 35/2020. Subsequently, there was 55/2020, wherein they had given similar extensions in respect of various actions to be taken or certain submissions to be made as far as an SC is concerned. So this is the major aspect of it. Of course, it is not applicable in respect of each and every kind of requirement of furnishing of any kind of reply or applications or documents, etc., because they have given certain exceptions for this. The extension of time would not be applicable for the compliances of relating to the time of supply, some of them relating to the e-way bill, relating to the returns. So like this, it is not applicable for these kinds of specific compliances or actions to be taken. But yes, wherever you all as SSCs are in receipt of any department inquiries, letters, investigations, or any such specified communication which has been there, including any show cause notices which may have been issued, certainly the shelter of this could be taken, and the extension of time could be made available even up to the June end of 2021. So this is also there, and also similarly they have given the facility that is for verification of application and approval of registration, where the time limit falls during period between May to 30th of June 2021, where the completion of action was not done within such time, then the time limit again extended up to the 15th subsequently. So that once again is something which is a relaxing measure, 15th day of July 2021. Okay. Similarly, they have given a relaxation in respect of notices for rejection of refund claim. And again, they have given the time limit for issuance of order. The time limit has been extended up to the 30th of June or 15 days after the receipt of reply to notice, whichever is later. So with this, I have finished the first part of our coverage as far as the amendments are concerned. The next part of it is going to be taken by Akshay, and whatever are the specific queries, feel free and put it in the chat box, and we will take all the queries in the end after Akshay finishes his deliberations as well. Akshay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Over to you, Akshay. You will present it, right?
Yeah, I will be presenting. Rashmi, can you confirm my PPT is visible?
Yeah, it's visible, Akshay. Full screen.
Yeah, thank you. So now that we have completed the clarifications in relation to goods, services, and the rates and various stands taken by the government in relation to exemptions, and of course the relaxations given only with respect to various proceedings or notices. In this portion of the amendments, which we will be discussing, some notified and some not notified, we would be discussing on the Rule 36(4) compliance, how they've eased the compliance, the interest on net liability, which has finally been notified, the extension of due dates, various extensions, GSTR1, the IFF statement, GSTR4, ITC04, and also we'll be discussing on the late fee waiver, a amnesty scheme which has been provided, a rationalization of the late fees and the interest, and some other important GST Council decisions which are yet to be notified. Coming to the ease of compliance with respect to the Rule 36(4) compliance, I think as many of you know, this is a compliance which is required to match our GSTR 2A, that is the GSTR 1 filed by our vendors against the ITC as per our books of accounts. From the beginning, that is October 2019, when it got introduced, they were allowing an ad hoc credit of 20%. Now they have reduced it from 1st January to 5%. And of course, we can clearly see in the future this 5% also will be removed. So they basically will be allowed to take credit only based on the invoices uploaded by our vendors. To further this cause, they have introduced through the Finance Act through 16(2) the provision which says that the condition, one of the conditions to claim credit is the vendor uploading his returns through GSTR 1. So these invoices are required to be uploaded through GSTR 1. To also avoid or overcome the earlier issue in relation to the quarterly filers, wherein the option was not there to file the details on a monthly basis, they introduced this IFF facility from January 2021, wherein the option to upload B2B invoices and the credit note and debit notes are allowed on a monthly basis, and the GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B are still filed on a quarterly basis. So this issue also has been resolved. So more or less, the compliance towards the reconciliation of GSTR 2A has been resolved. And an additional bonus which has been also given, I can say, which I should have come much earlier, is the GSTR 2B. The GSTR 2B is a static statement in relevance to or in relevance to the GSTR 2A, which is a dynamic statement. So the difference being, if my vendor is filing his returns on a delayed basis, that means after the due date, the details in GSTR 2A are getting auto-populated in the same month, which means I need to keep on taking the updated GSTR 2A statements, which means that my reconciliation for a period can never be said to be completed. But that can be overcome through the GSTR 2B being a static statement, wherein once the date is passed, they will be keeping a 1 or 2 day buffer after the GSTR 1 due dates, and then they'll be giving you the GSTR 2B. Of course, now for these months of April, May, and June, please keep in mind that there are relaxations provided, so these dates may vary. But for the purpose of reconciliation, I advise GSTR 2B to be used for the purpose of Rule 36(4) reconciliation. Saying this, I would advise that wherever up to the period that this Finance Act amendment of 16(2) has been introduced in the GST law through a notification, until that date, this Rule 36(4) can always be questioned. It can be said to be invalid. It can be said to be legally invalid also. So anyone facing notices in relation to the Rule 36(4) compliances can, of course, fight the case if the transaction is genuine and the payments have been made to the vendors. Now, coming to the actual compliance, which has been eased, I can say only eased because the compliance is still required to be performed. Only they have deferred the compliance timeline. So instead of performing the timelines for the month of April and May, what they have said is you can do April, May, June together while filing the June 2021 GSTR 3B returns. Of course, the due dates for these returns have not changed. They have only waived off the late fees and they have given a reduction in the interest. Coming to the importance of interest on net liability. Now, as everyone knows, this is a long-standing issue which was taken to courts, and finally they have introduced through the Finance Act a Section 50 amendment wherein they said that the interest will be applicable on the cash payment portion for a specific month, and the liability for that specific month should be disclosed in such month. Now, there is a small catch here, which is that the liability for the month should be disclosed in such month. So if I am disclosing a previous month liability, that is where there is a little difference in the interpretation of the Section 50. But nevertheless, this Section 50 net liability concept has now been introduced through notification 16 but 2021, and it has a retrospective effect that is from 1st July 2017. There have been certain notices which have been received, and payments also have been made by certain clients. So in these situations where payment was made on the gross basis, a refund of the interest can be claimed. The next portion which I need to emphasize upon is that RCM liability, being a liability of in cash in nature only, will always maintain a gross liability, and therefore even if you do have ITC balance and you have RCM liability, the interest on RCM will always uh, prevail. Now coming to the interpretation in relation to liabilities of previous period discharged in our current GSTR 3Bs. So of course the strict interpretation as per section 51 is that the interest would be on gross liability even if we have an ITC balance. But considering various erstwhile decisions and decisions under GST, I think this view would not be tenable, and our view being that would still be liable on a net liability basis wherever the credit balances are available would be held up in the future. So I've also given some case law references in relation to this interest on net liability. Coming to our amnesty scheme, which is the late fee reduction amnesty scheme, they have provided through notification 19, and it has been provided mainly for the non-compliant taxpayers. Now, coming to what the amnesty scheme is that for the period July 2017 to April 2021, the GSTR 3Bs, which have not been filed but are being filed between the period 1st June to 31st August 2021, only between this period, if any of these returns are filed, the late fee will be capped at 500 rupees if the tax liability is nil, and 1000 rupees if the tax liability is there. Now, this has been provided to ensure that the persons who have not filed are able to file their returns now. There may be some genuine cases wherein there was some system error which was not allowing them to file, or there were certain cases which were ongoing and therefore they were unable to file their returns till date. But more so, this amnesty scheme has been provided for the non-compliant taxpayers. Coming to the compliant and the honest taxpayers who have already paid the late fees in the earlier periods and have paid much more than the figures which have been capped on in this through this notification. In my view, refund can be applied for whatever excess late fees that have been paid. Although this has not been mentioned, and the condition which they have provided that you have to have filed the returns between 1st June and 31st August, the concept of giving this benefit must not be withheld from the people who have already filed the returns. One tip which is required here is tax liability being nil need not be that my return does not have any information. My return can have information, which means I could have exempt supply, I could have zero rated supply without payment of tax, or I may be disclosing my non-GST supply in the case of construction industries. All these cases would still be considered as nil tax liability returns for the purpose of GST. Now coming to some of the due date extensions, there is a few returns which I have mentioned, of course. Now there were some earlier notifications which have been provided in the end of, I think, April, if I'm not wrong, and now they have provided this in the end of May and June. So for the month of April, they had extended the timelines by 15 days to file the GSTR1, which is filed on a monthly basis, and the similar extension was given even for the May return recently. For the IFF, which is the invoice furnishing facility, now even though this may not be applicable to you directly, indirectly this may be applicable as your vendors may be filing this. So again, IFF facility is to be filed on a monthly basis where the returns are being filed under the quarterly returns and monthly payment scheme. And here again, they have given another 15 days extension in each of the months. Now coming to composition, which is the GSTR4, your CMP08 monthly filing. Coming to the return period for the financial year 2021, the annual return under GSTR4, the due date was 30th April, and presently the extension stands as on 31st July 2021. Even for the ITC 04, which is in relation to the job work transactions, which has to be filed by the principal. Now, this is a quarterly return wherein for the quarter ending March 2021, the due date has been extended up to 30th June 2021. I have also provided the notification references if anyone is interested. Now, earlier, what we talked about is a late fee waiver, which is a one-time amnesty scheme. Now, this is a late fee reduction for the present returns. So, coming to the notification, this has, of course, been provided so that the COVID pandemic period does not impose a high late fee for persons who are unable to file their returns. I have seen practically on many cases where the access to the books of accounts were not there, or in invoicing or the accounting of the purchase invoices could not have been done because they could not have access to their offices and their books of accounts. And therefore, for the month of April, as in Karnataka, at least the transactions for, the lockdown started from 20th April. There always was this issue in the from the accounts perspective, and therefore they have given these relaxations. So for these periods, now the difference, if you see, the due date remains the same for every month. 20th of the next month is the due date, but there is a difference. For the GST returns, there are two categories: above 5 crores and below 5 crores. So for the ones which are above 5 crores, they have given a 15-day period wherein the late fee will not be applicable. Please note the due date remains the same. Only thing, the late fee waiver has been provided. Similarly, for below 5 crores, that is up to 5 crore GST or 3B returns, there is a little extension in relation to the late fees, which is 19 June, 4th July, and 20th July. In my view, there are majority of the filers in India, if you see, who will be comprising of the up to 5 crore, and therefore that benefits them. And above 5 crores, of course, the government would not like to let go of. Sorry. So up to 5 crore, of course, the government would be wanting the taxpayers to make the payments as soon as possible, and therefore they have reduced the timelines for late fees. I have given a separate slide for the QRMP, and of course, there is one more upper cap limit on late fees, which I'll be discussing in the upcoming slides. Now, coming to our interest reduction. Now, please note, this is only an interest reduction, which means this does not overcome the it does not mean there is a waiver of interest. Of course, there is a slight waiver in certain cases, which I will be discussing. Now, for again here, the due dates remain the same. Let us take the situation of above 5 crores first, which is the March, April, and May. Earlier, there was a notification as per 8/2021, and now there is a notification 18/2021. There is a change between these two notifications. In the first notification, there was certain grace period which was provided between the nil rate 9% and the 18% interest. But that has been changed slightly in the new notification. But if you see, ideally, from the old notification to the old notification, for the above 5 crore transactions, the dates remain the same. The only difference is in the new notification they have added for the month of May. And here again, if you see, they have again given a 15-day extension up from the 20th April. And this extension, basically they are providing, saying that the liability now which you are liable to pay in cash for that month is liable at 9% instead of 18% for the first 15 days. Beyond that, so assume that I'm filing the returns where my turnover for the preceding financial year is more than 5 crores. I'm filing the returns on 10th May. So for the first 15 days, I'll pay 9% on the cash payment only. And for the balance 5 days, I will pay at 18%. So this is how the computation will go. Similarly, even for the turnovers up to 5 crore, the due dates have been provided. But again, there are some more relaxations provided there. considering that these may be very small businessmen who may have a lot of cash flow issues. Coming to our quarter ending March 2021, in relation to the GSTR4, your CAP08, this is for class of taxpayers having, of course, below 1.5 crore turnover. The due date is 18th April 2021. Earlier, they had given the as per the notification which has been extended, but for the first 15 days they have said there will be nil rate of interest, and then they have for the next 45 days they have said it will be at a 9% interest, that will be 18% interest. Now these are graded interest applications, which means for such periods the interest will apply. You do not need to see it on a cumulative basis. Now coming to those who are filing on a quarterly basis, the quarterly return monthly payment scheme, there are two due dates based on the category of states, category A and category B. I hope all of you have received our PDF document, which is the summary of the updates. In that, these category A and category B states will be available. If not, even if you Google them, which are the category A and category B states for under GST, you will get the information. Here they have extended, they have not extended the due dates, but again they have given a waiver of the late fee for 1 month. So this is again 22nd, for 60 days, which equals to 2 months, which is 22nd April to 22nd June and 24th April to 24th June. So if, for example, category A states generally have all the metro cities which are Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Delhi as such, and category B states would be the smaller states. Now coming to interest applicability, they have divided into 3 segments because the payments are still needed to be performed on a monthly basis. The GSTR 3B and GSTR 1 is filed on a quarterly basis, but payment through the Challan PMT06 will be performed on a monthly basis. Now for the month of March, because it is the quarter ending, the due date will be 22nd or 24th. And for the month of April and May, the due dates will be 25th. Now I have not taken the example of 24th here. I've taken only one example of 22nd. Of course, if you put 24th, you have to just add 2 more days to the entire line. Now the notification 18 but 2021, what it says is for the first 15 days, again there's a nil rate, which means interest would not be applicable for the next 45, 30 and 15. So 45 for March, 30 for April and 15 for May. So these are the extensions provided to each of the headings, which comes to these due dates: 19 June, 10th July and 25th July. So for that period from 7th May to 19 June, there will be a 9% interest application, and after that date, so 20th June onwards, it will be at 18%. So I hope this table is clear and it can be understood. Now, of course, majority of our clients may not be having QRMP transactions, but this would be there for your vendors. So if they are having any issues in relation to filing returns, please do not pressurize them if they do not have the details, because again, filing those informations and taking a revision may lead to some more issues in the future. Now there has been a rationalization. So whatever we have discussed up till now is for the transactions up to date, up to the amnesty scheme up to April 2021, the late fees and the interest reductions up to the May 2021 returns. So going forward from June 2021 onwards, there has been a rationalization of late, mainly considering that the taxpayers are paying huge amount of late fees for small errors, which are maybe even from the department perspective. So therefore, to reduce the same, they have given these lists, wherein for above 5 crore entities, there is no change. The maximum late fees per return, please note all these numbers are per return. So above 5 crores per return, the maximum late fees which will be applicable is 10,000 as per section 47. But they have given these benefits for the persons who are filing below. Now, one important concept again is this nil tax liability. So even if a person who has above 5 crore turnover has a nil tax liability, his maximum late fee for that return would be capped at 500 and would not be 10,000. So this is something which can be noted. For those persons having up to 1.5 crore and disclosing a tax liability, it's 2,000, and 1.5 to 5 crore having tax liability and disclosing is 5,000. So this is going to be implemented from the June 2021 returns onwards or the quarter ending 2021 returns onwards. For GSTR 4 and GSTR 7 also, they have given these capping of late fees of 500, 2000 and of course the 50 and 2000 which is good for GSTR 7. Of course, this is for TDS, which is the government entities who need to file the GSTR 7 TDS deduction for contracts more than 2.5 lakhs. So this you can refer section 51 for some more details on GSTR 7 and the TDS implications. Coming to the other issues, which is in relation to the council decisions, in relation to the amendment of section 35 and 44. Now here the important thing to keep in mind is in the Finance Act now, they are going to bring in a provision wherein the audit, which is the certification by an external person being a chartered accountant or a cost accountant, will be omitted, which has been omitted from the GST law. Therefore, the onus of filing the GSTR 9C is shifted to the taxpayer. So please keep in mind GSTR 9 and GSTR 9C still required to be filed. There has not been any relaxation from that. 9C is still required to be filed. The due date still remains December of the year. So for 2021, December 2021 is the due date. This implication, what it creates is that earlier the auditor used to certify and say these are all fine and there are no tax recommendations from his end. But once it is signed by the taxpayer himself, similar to the GSTR 9, in future the government or the department is going to take up the audit procedures, which will be similar to how it was happening in the erstwhile regimes. They have also provided in the council that council meeting of GSTR 9 and GSTR 9A, where the aggregate turnover up to 2 crores. For such persons, the GSTR 9 and 9A need not be filed. Similarly, for persons having turnover above 5 crores, they need not, up to 5 crores, need not have the GSTR 9C. There have not been any information on changes in the formats in relation to the GSTR 9 or 9C. This would surely be notified in another, say, 1 or 2 months, because anyway the due date remains December 2021. But the earlier ambiguity as to from which period this omission of the GST audit applies has been cleared through the GST Council recommendations. It will be applicable from the financial year 2021 onwards. Through notification 27/2021, because the filing through DSC requires a certain requirement of a laptop and certain drivers, and also the person who is signing is to have the access to such DSC. They, during this pandemic, they have also allowed for GSTR 3B, GSTR 1 and IFF of the companies to be filed through the EVC portal, which means the OTP through to the registered mobile number can be availed up to 31st August 2021, after which you will have to again file only through the DSC. There are also certain changes which are expected in relation to the GSTR 1 and 3B return filing system, but this has not yet been notified, nor is the formats been provided for any changes. So of course, as and when this comes up, we will be informing you. I have finished my session a little early so that we can take up queries. So any queries in relation to Rupa ma'am session or my session, we would be able to answer you. You can unmute and speak.
Any queries which are there may be shared with us. You all can also put in the chat box.
Chat box, I am not able to send any messages upon. So
Not
maybe
happening.
others also may not be able to.
Oh, okay. Feel free to ask any queries which may be there.
Any general query on GST can be taken?
Sir, if it is, if you can just tell us what is the query, possibly we can also.
Yeah. Actually, the issue is in our account, GST account, in the last month, some amount has been blocked in credit ledger. So we don't know what for what reason the amount has been blocked. So how to go about it?
Akshay, you will like to answer this query? Then I will supplement.
Sir, the possibility of why this amount has been blocked may be because of if you have received any notices in relation to the Rule 36(4) or ITC mismatches. In relation to that, they may have blocked this credit. One of the verification methods is under notices. If you have not received any physical notice, even in the GST portal, there is a tab wherein you can see the notices which have been raised by the department. So that may be one of the reasons they have blocked the credit. But if not, you will have to identify your jurisdictional officer and then ask him why this credit has been blocked. Ideally, without intimation, they will not be allowed to block the account, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Just to supplement what Akshay has rightly said, is our own experience. We are seeing this happening with a lot of our clients. Wherein overnight when you log in, it is coming. The message is that your electronic credit ledger has been blocked, and the reasons are the ones which Akshay has told you. So what we would suggest to our clients is, like he said, please communicate, send across an RPAD letter, okay, to the jurisdictional officer. And if you're having a mail ID, please that same letter also you send it to him, scan, sign, and send it to that official mail ID, and also mark it to the commissioner. And then send a reminder, because we have had this happening even for amounts like 4 or 5 crores over not being blocked. And once we sent out these letters, it was unblocked, just like that.
Okay.
So our suggestion would be that, and I'm sure our audit team will support you for the vetting, the drafting of the letter, and sending of it as well.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you for your input.
Yeah. Anything else?
Akshay, can you throw some light on that complaint through the portal? Is it possible in such cases?
You are telling reply to notice?
No. There is no notice. Without that, you can use the portal for complaints also, no? Putting some questions. Or is it not possible?
That if you're talking communication to taxpayers, that is a separate facility which has been made available 6 months back.
Akshay, maybe in terms of grievance, sir is saying we can raise grievance.
Grievance.
No? Okay, yeah.
Through
Grievances,
the
of course. Yeah. So what I can do, I can show it in the screen. My screen is visible, right?
Yeah, it's visible.
So at the end of the GST login, we have a grievance redressal portal. So if we click on that link, we'll be able to raise a grievance and the details will be given. So enable the user to lodge his complaint, and we have the type of issues. So say I have credit. So I will be able to get all these information. So tran credit not received, 2B error in cash. I'll put ledger. So payments in ledger not updated, issue with ledger after filing, issue with amount transfer. So error in cash credit ledger balances. This also can be available. This also if you keep putting the type of concern, if you put in some of the keywords, you will get the concern, and then you will be able to select any one of them and then go ahead. So if I put this, I'll be able to put this, I'll be able to attach the any documents if I want. And here they'll first provide an FAQ. You have to put no, I want to lodge my complaint, and then these details have to be provided. Please ensure these are provided carefully. And this also can be documented through it will be available in the registered mail. Document this for future correspondences with the department.
Thanks, Akshay. We can wait for the next question.
I think there was some
hello,
raised
Rupa.
hands. Yeah.
Hello, Rupa.
Yes.
Yeah, can you just brief me this ITC availment by landowner and taxes paid by the developer? Because when we have to raise the bill and on what basis we have to?
Okay. Right, ma'am. See, what happens is that when there is a construction service which is being provided, which I explained in the course of the deliberations by the developer to the landlord, then the question comes that when this service has been supplied, what should be the point of time at which the invoice is to be raised? Because certainly there is no payment which is being done, as far as this the services provided by the developer is concerned to the landlord. So therein this enabling beneficial notification was there, which was initially FOBA 2018, wherein in the context of the GST law, they had clarified that the time of discharging of the tax liability in respect of these construction services which are being given by the developer to the landlord, that could be done at the time of the handover or at the time of the allotment of the unit, which would be done, which would happen at the end. So it would be at the time of the delivery or the handover which is taking place. And now subsequently, when they came out with the new scheme of real estate, taxation under GST law, they had brought out along with the notification 3 to 6/2019. In that, specifically in 6/2019, they said that we are going to give the facility wherein the time of discharging the liability in respect of the landowner's share could be postponed to the time of the completion certificate or at the time of the first occupancy which takes place, which again would be something which would be towards the end of the project. So therein, though this facility has been there, but validly, if you asked any of the landlords, certainly a question would be there for them also, especially for the ones who are already registered under the GST law, that can they take a credit of whatever is the taxes which are proposed to be charged to them, and if yes, what would be the optimal time at which they would be enabled to take a credit. So if these invoices were to be raised at the end, wherein let's say, like I was just giving the example a little earlier, that actually the advance is received towards the sale of the units by the landlord also in the course of construction. Let's say today, in the month of May, if he has received that money and he wants to discharge output tax liability, it may be even residential units on which the landlord is liable to pay tax under the new scheme at 5%. But then if he is going to get an invoice at the time of the occupancy certificate or at the time of the completion certificate, which will be, let's say, at the end of 2022, then certainly by then he has already discharged his liability in cash. Where is the credit with him? So to overcome this, and let me also once again emphasize, we have always suggested this, that is only a facility which is enabling beneficial measure which has been given by the government in the notification. In fact, they can even raise the invoices much earlier and discharge the taxes much earlier by the developer, and accordingly even that would ideally match it with the month in which the landlord is liable to pay the taxes, so that when the landlord discharges liability, he can net off or set off to the extent of the taxes which he is going to be paying.
On what basis? On what basis we have to raise the bill?
Yeah. So therein, you're talking about valuation, I'm assuming? Valuation,
yeah,
right?
Actually, no,
Is
there
it
will
a
be...
residential or is it a commercial project?
No, I just want to check with you whether this is applicable for residential as well as the commercial.
Yes, ma'am. It is applicable for both the scenarios. It should be applicable, and it is possible to raise an invoice, much before the handover takes place. So if there is a requirement for the raising of the invoice, because in this month of May, the flat has been sold by the landlord and he wants to discharge the tax liability on that, on his output, towards the advance received from customer, then accordingly the developer also will raise the invoice matching the time line in this month itself towards the that particular unit, say flat 104 or something. He will also raise an invoice so that the credit set off will be available immediately in this month to the developer, from the developer to the landlord. And it's not getting postponed to the end, because in the end anyway the project is completed. So where can the landlord take a credit? He also would have by then started selling the units post completion, and on those units no output GST, nor can he take a credit. So the entire thing becomes a cost. So this is a way of unlocking the credit to the this landowners, and it works very well. And this is what we have been practically suggesting to our clients over the years, even in the GST law.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Rupu.
Yeah.
Hello, this is Manjunath from AT&S, Mysore, madam. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, is there any update on Manjunath from AT&S, Mysore?
Yes.
Yeah, is there any update on amendment of Section 16 of IGST Act to specify a class of persons and a class of goods and export of IGST payment?
No, sir.
Presently, there has not been done. Akshay, please.
Sorry, ma'am. Yes, it has not been done presently, sir.
Then we can continue, no? You can continue with export of IGST.
Yes. You can do with payment of tax. You can continue with that transactions.
Okay. Thank you, Akshay.
Ma'am, there are few questions in the chat. I'll just take up.
Okay.
The first question is from.
1 minute.
Yeah.
As far as that question of IGST is concerned, in fact, Manjunath asked a good question. All those people who are doing export who are on the call, you should use this window, because this window may get closed and then you may start getting accumulation. So thanks, Manjunath, for that. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
One question is from Ram sir. Can we take input credit for April and May as per our books of accounts without reconciling GSTR 2A and 2B? Yes, as per the notification, credit can be claimed directly as per your books of accounts. But just a suggestion, if you are expecting any of your vendors not to file their GSTR 1 before 20th July 2021, which is your June due date, then suggest to claim it only after he files the GSTR 1. And in such cases also, you can, for these non-compliant unorganized vendors, make the payment also to them, or at least the tax payment to them, only after the transactions are reflecting in your GSTR 1 returns.
Akshay, I'll just add, very important, very well explained. The point which is very important is that we need to categorize our vendors into at least 3 categories: A, B, C, compliant, mostly compliant, and unsure. So A and B, possibly you can take the credit without bothering, and the C category, as Akshay said, you may like to defer. Mostly the C category value also may be lower. That's only a small additional information I have given.
Okay, I will take the next question, which is in relation to this for Rupa ma'am. Hello ma'am, if finished goods are stolen, do we need to reverse ITC? When it has to be done? Example, if goods are lost in April 2021, when do we need to reverse?
Okay. See, if you're telling that the goods have been lost, here there are 2 things which we need to look at. Whether the provision is talking about the goods, which are the materials which are being introduced into the production process, which gets lost. Is that the intention to reverse the credit only pertaining to that? Or is it that the intention is to reverse a credit which is pertaining to the finished goods which we are telling is lost? Because as we are very clear that as far as GST is concerned, GST is applicable on the supply which takes place of the goods or the services, and supply of the goods can be even something which may be said to be disposing of the goods, also said to be a supply. But coming back to the larger point, whether the intention of the GST provision in this section 17.5, wherein it is blocking certain credits, is it to restrict the credit in respect of the raw materials which have been lost? Or is it to restrict the credit in respect of the finished goods which have been lost? Now, about the first category, there should not be a doubt. And remember, lost means lost irretrievably, which means there is no scope or hope that these goods are going to be found at all. It is totally not going to be got back, nor is it going to be retrieved in whatever form and manner whatsoever. So if that has happened to the raw materials, or the materials itself were lost before it has come into the factory, then certainly that portion of the credit on these raw materials should not be available. And also that may be the intention also of the law, because therein I have not even received the goods. And one of the conditions for us to take a credit is that I should have received the goods. But coming to this second category, which we need to be a little more careful about, is the FG. If it is a finished goods, one thing is very clear, that already we have inputted the materials, we have received the materials, we would have got the invoice, we would have discharged the taxes, paid the vendor may have paid the taxes to the government, and all these conditions or the preconditions for availment of credit have got satisfied. So once that is satisfied and the materials have been used in the course of furtherance of business, is it correct to say that this particular restriction which is in place should still be made to apply? Therein, if we are to go and if we are to look into the specifics of the section, and if we look at that section 17, therein again that should be having a non-obstante clause, which is basically telling that notwithstanding any other provisions which may be there, there is a requirement or a liability to, as far as reverse the credit on the lost goods is concerned. That is a specific provision which is there, which is a overriding effect. So I would say once the goods have actually been used in the process of manufacture, and when there is no output GST being paid on that, then certainly it may be said that there is a requirement to reverse the credit on such goods which have been lost, going by the contention that once the goods output has not suffered tax, the input side also the credit should not be eligible. That may be the safest view which could be taken.
Rupa, the next question is in relation to capital assets. Is there any valuation method under GST if we sell capital assets?
Okay. Akshay, would you like to take that question about the capital assets?
Yeah. So in relation to capital assets, there is one specific condition which is under 18.6, section 18.6, wherein it says that if capital assets are being sold where the credit has been claimed under GST, I mean, not under the erstwhile laws, under GST where credit has been claimed and the capital goods are being sold, the transaction value will be considered unless and until the credit in relation to the transaction, if we take a 5% per quarter deductible from the date of when that capital goods has been purchased until the sale or the supply of such goods, if we remove 5% per quarter from the ITC total, then if the tax amount as per the transaction value and as per is lower than the ITC value which has been computed, then the tax which is payable will be the higher of the two. So this is the implication under 18.6 for capital goods. Also in relation to motor vehicles, you would have to follow notification number 8/2018, where there is a special valuation and concessional rates which are applicable. Anything to add, Rupama?
Yeah, madam,
Nothing.
I have a question on this. I have a question on the same subject. If the
Please.
supply made to SEZ, it's a zero rated one. If as per Akshay sir mentioned that life of the asset would be around 5 years. So if I'm selling the goods within 3 years, means after completion of the 3 years, do I need to reverse the credit? Though the supplier, means the vendor, has not charged ITC at the time of supply because they're providing a services to SEZ location. When I remove the goods from SEZ location as a scrap, do I need to reverse the credit to the extent of next 2 years or something?
Ma'am, in this situation, you are the SEZ location.
Yes. Yes.
And you have purchased the goods from vendor who has sold it to you as zero rated supply without payment of tax.
Correct.
Correct. So in that situation, 18.6 will not apply because there was no credit. The precondition is that credit should have been claimed.
Okay.
So now when SEZ is doing a further supply, then that transaction would not come under this 18.6 requirement.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And the second question, what I have on this Finance Act 2021, I think the Mr. Ramu also asked the same question. The section 123, where it says there will be a restriction for filing a refund claim. This will be notified. Is any progress has been made in the during this council meeting, or we are good to file a refund claim till now? And if at all notifies in the future, whether it will be retrospective or prospective?
It would ideally be prospective because once you have filed a note, when on the date when you have filed the application, the notification was not out. So ideally, it would be prospective. And in the council meeting, this present council meeting, there was no decision in relation to the refund-related Section 16 restrictions, which was brought in the Finance Act.
Okay, thank you.
There is one more question which is there in relation to extension for refund application submission. So I think, ma'am, this is covered under your relaxation of under 168A. Would you confirm?
Yeah, I'll just confirm that. As far as this is concerned, they have given some specific exceptions, telling that for certain categories of transactions or certain categories of compliances, this relaxation is not there. Therein, refund related is nowhere being mentioned. So, that particular thing should be applicable even in respect of refunds, and the extension which has been provided under that section and which has been notified, that would continue to be available and applicable up to 30th of June 2021.
So if the 2 years time limit completes within the period mentioned under that notification, then it should be read as 30th June.
Yes, read as 30th June
instead of that date. There are no more questions in the chat. Someone is typing. Yeah, I think no more questions in the chat.
Okay. Anybody else has any questions to ask from us? And you can also mail us, at rupa@hiragange.com. If any further questions are there also, even beyond this session, you can please get in touch with us, roopa@hiregange.com. And Akshay will share his details as well.
I have pulled up in the chat box.
Okay.
Rashmi, would you be concluding?
Yeah, Akshay. Thank you, Rupa ma'am. Thank you, Akshay. Not just elaborating or giving insight about the recent changes and the council meeting's decision, but also to give us the practical insight, whether it may be in the terms of 36(4) clarification or interest related clarification and other things. Rupa ma'am gave how the developer can help the promoter by advancing his payment and all. So I hope it was a useful session, not just an update, and also a insight for tax planning and all. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Akshay, for your wonderful session. And a big thanks to the participants also. A good number of participants were there. They were proactive and they were asking the questions. Thanks for the patient listening and active participation. Thank you all for the participants.
Thanks, Rashmi. Thanks, Akshay, and thanks to everybody. Thanks, Madhukar sir.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all. I'll conclude this session. I'll close.
Thank you.
Thank you.